You forgot your lunch, Daddy. The maid's toddler whispered to a billionaire who wasn't her father. Alexander Sterling had never been called Daddy by anyone in his 33 years of existence, and he certainly hadn't expected to hear it whispered in the marble lobby of Sterling Enterprises at 7:30 on a Monday morning. He'd been reviewing acquisition reports on his phone, his Italian leather shoes clicking against the polished floor as he strode toward the private elevator, when he felt a tiny tug on his charcoal suit pants. Alexander looked down, startled, to find a pair of enormous brown eyes staring up at him with an expression of pure, innocent concern. You forgot your lunch, Daddy, the little girl whispered, holding up a crumpled brown paper bag with both hands. She couldn't have been more than 3 years old, with wild curls escaping from lopsided pigtails and a smudge of what looked like jelly on her cheek. Alexander froze. In the cutthroat world of corporate takeovers and billion-dollar deals, nothing rattled him. He'd stared down hostile board members, negotiated with ruthless competitors, and built an empire before most of his peers had paid off their student loans. But this tiny human, with her quivering lip and earnest offering, left him completely disarmed. I think you've made a mistake, he said gently, crouching down to her level despite the protests of his expensive suit. I'm not your daddy, sweetheart. The little girl's face crumpled, and Alexander felt an unfamiliar pang in his chest. Before he could say anything else, he heard the sharp intake of breath behind him and the sound of hurried footsteps. Emma. Oh my God, Emma. A young woman rushed forward, her cleaning cart abandoned near the elevators. She was wearing the gray uniform of the building's janitorial staff, her honey blonde hair pulled back in a neat ponytail, her face flushed with panic and mortification. I'm so sorry, Mr. Sterling. She got away from me for just a second. Alexander stood, still holding the paper bag, and found himself looking into eyes the same warm brown as the child's. The woman, he glimpsed her name tag reading Sarah Martinez, was trying to scoop up her daughter while apologizing profusely, her words tumbling over each other in her distress. It's quite all right, Alexander heard himself saying, surprising even himself with the gentleness in his voice. He looked at the bag in his hands. Though I am curious about this lunch I apparently forgot. Sarah's cheeks flushed even deeper. Emma made it for someone else. She's been confused lately. I'm really sorry for bothering you, Mr. Sterling. It won't happen again. There was something in her voice, a tremor of pain beneath the embarrassment, that made Alexander pause. Emma had stopped struggling in her mother's arms and was now looking between them with confusion clouding her little face. Where's Daddy? Emma asked, her voice small and lost. Sarah's eyes filled with tears that she blatantly fought back. Baby, remember? Daddy's in heaven now. We talked about this. Alexander felt his heart constrict in a way he'd never experienced before. He'd lost his own father 5 years ago and remembered the hollow ache of that loss. But to be 3 years old and trying to understand that kind of permanence. I see, he said quietly. He held out the lunch bag to Emma. Well, whoever this lunch was for, I'm sure they would have loved it. You did a very good job. Emma's lower lip trembled. But Daddy's hungry. He didn't eat breakfast. Sarah's composure finally cracked, a single tear escaping down her cheek before she quickly wiped it away. I'm sorry, she whispered again, turning to leave with Emma in her arms. Wait, Alexander said, the word escaping before his rational mind could stop it. Both mother and daughter turned to look at him. I actually haven't had breakfast either. Would Emma like to share this lunch with me? Just in the cafe downstairs. My treat for breakfast. Sarah's eyes widened. Mr. Sterling, you don't have to. I'd like to, he interrupted, and realized with surprise that he meant it. Besides, I have a meeting in an hour, and I really should eat something. It was a flimsy excuse, and they both knew it. Alexander Sterling could have anything he wanted delivered to his office, with a single phone call. But something in Sarah's exhausted eyes and Emma's grief-stricken little face called to something deep inside him that had been dormant for far too long. Sarah hesitated, clearly torn between professionalism and her daughter's emotional needs. Emma, meanwhile, had perked up slightly, looking at Alexander with new interest. "You're hungry too?" Emma asked. "Starving," Alexander confirmed with a small smile. "Okay," Emma decided with a swift certainty only a 3-year-old could muster. "You can have the sandwich. I made it special." And that's how Alexander Sterling, billionaire CEO of one of the most powerful corporations in America, found himself sitting in the building's employee cafe at 7:45 on a Monday morning, eating a slightly squashed peanut butter and jelly sandwich, while a grieving toddler explained to him very seriously that the crusts had to be cut off because that's how Daddy liked it. Sarah sat across from him, still looking like she might bolt at any second, her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee she wasn't drinking. She'd explained, in halting words when Emma was distracted by a muffin, that her husband, Emma's father, had died 4 months ago. A car accident. Sudden. Devastating. She'd taken the night cleaning job at Sterling Enterprises because the hours allowed her to be with Emma during the day, and her mother could watch Emma while she slept in the mornings. "I usually bring Emma with me for the last hour before my shift ends," Sarah explained quietly. "My mom has an early doctor's appointment this morning, so I didn't have a choice. She's usually very good, stays by the cart, colors in her books." "I don't know what happened today." "I'm so sorry she bothered you." "She didn't bother me," Alexander found himself saying. He watched Emma carefully arranging goldfish crackers in a line on the table. "She thought I was her father?" Sarah's eyes filled again. "She's been confused. She's so young. She doesn't really understand that he's not coming back. Some mornings she makes him lunch, like she's seen me do 1,000 times. She puts in all his favorites." Sarah's voice broke. "I don't have the heart to stop her. Her therapist says it's part of processing the grief." Alexander felt something shift in his chest, like a door he'd kept locked for years was being gently pried open. He'd built walls around himself after his own losses, first his father, then a string of relationships that had taught him that people usually wanted something from him. Money, connections, status. He'd learned to be suspicious, to keep people at arm's length. But this little girl with jelly on her face didn't want anything except her daddy back. And her mother, with exhaustion etched in every line of her young face, wasn't asking for anything at all. "Mr. Sterling," Sarah said, glancing at her watch. "I really need to get back to work. I can't afford to." "Take the morning off," Alexander said. The words came easily, naturally. "Paid. Spend it with Emma. I'll clear it with building management." Sarah's eyes went wide. "I can't accept." "You can," Alexander said firmly but kindly. "And you will." Emma's had a confusing morning. "So have you. Take the time." As he stood to leave, Emma looked up at him with those impossibly big eyes. "Are you going to be my daddy now?" The question hung in the air like a soap bubble, fragile and iridescent. Sarah turned scarlet, stammering another apology, but Alexander simply crouched down one more time. "No, sweetheart," he said gently. "You already had a daddy who loved you very much. But maybe I could be your friend." Emma considered this with the gravity of a Supreme Court justice. Finally, she nodded. "Okay. Friends share lunch." "That's right," Alexander agreed. Friends share lunch. As he rode the elevator up to his office, Alexander caught his reflection in the polished doors. He looked the same sharp suit, same composed expression. But something felt different inside. Something had cracked open in that brief encounter, letting in a sliver of light he hadn't realized he'd been missing. His assistant, Margaret, did a double take when he walked past her desk. "Sir, you have peanut butter on your tie." Alexander looked down at the smudge and smiled. Actually smiled, something Margaret had rarely seen in her 10 years of working for him. "So I do," he said. "Hold my calls for 10 minutes, would you?" As he sat at his desk, looking out over the Manhattan skyline, Alexander couldn't stop thinking about those brown eyes and that whispered, "You forgot your lunch, Daddy." It had been a case of mistaken identity, a moment of childhood confusion born from grief and loss. But somehow, in that moment, Alexander Sterling had been found by something he hadn't even known he was looking for. 3 weeks passed before Alexander saw them again, though he'd thought about that morning more often than he cared to admit. He'd caught himself several times walking through the lobby at different hours, telling himself he was checking on building operations, knowing he was really looking for a little girl with wild curls and her tired young mother. When he finally did see them again, it was purely by accident, or perhaps by fate. It was late, nearly 9 p.m., and Alexander had been buried in contract negotiations that had stretched well past dinner. He'd decided to grab coffee from the employee break room on the 20th floor rather than wait for the executive cafe to deliver, needing to stretch his legs and clear his head. That's where he found Sarah, sitting alone at one of the small tables, her head in her hands, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. For a moment, Alexander considered backing away quietly. He'd built his empire by knowing when to advance and when to retreat, by respecting boundaries and maintaining professional distance. But something about the raw grief in her posture stopped him. "Sarah," he said softly. She jerked upright, hastily wiping her eyes, her face going pale when she recognized him. "Mr. Sterling." "I'm sorry, I'm on my break. I wasn't." "It's all right," he assured her, moving into the room slowly, as one might approach a frightened animal. "Are you okay?" It was a stupid question, and they both knew it. She clearly wasn't okay. But sometimes stupid questions were the only way to start. Sarah laughed, the sound bitter and broken. "I'm fine. Just today would have been our 5th anniversary. Mine and Daniel's." She said her late husband's name like a prayer, like something sacred and painful. 5 years. We were supposed to grow old together. And now I'm alone, working nights, barely holding it together, and Emma? Her voice cracked. "Emma asked me this morning why Daddy didn't love us enough to come home." Alexander felt the words like a punch to his chest. He pulled out the chair across from her and sat down, abandoning every rule he'd ever set for himself about maintaining professional boundaries. "I lost my father 5 years ago," he said quietly. "I was 28. I thought I was prepared. He'd been sick for months. But you're never really prepared, are you? For how quiet the world gets after. How much space one person's absence can take up." Sarah looked at him with surprise, seeing him perhaps for the first time not as the billionaire CEO, but as someone who understood loss. How did you get through it?" Alexander considered the question honestly. "I didn't, not really. I buried myself in work, built walls, convinced myself that if I didn't let anyone too close, I wouldn't have to feel that kind of pain again." He met her eyes. "I don't recommend it." A small smile flickered across Sarah's tear-stained face. "Noted." They sat in companionable silence for a moment before Alexander asked, "Where's Emma tonight?" "With my mother. She watches her during my shifts." Sarah twisted her wedding ring. She still wore it, Alexander noticed. "I hate being away from her, but the night differential pay is better, and with Daniel's medical bills from the accident." She trailed off, shaking her head. "I'm sorry. You don't need to hear all this." "What if I want to?" The words surprised them both. Sarah studied him with those expressive brown eyes, and Alexander had the unsettling feeling she was seeing more than he usually let people see. "Why are you being so kind to us, Mr. Sterling? People like you don't usually notice people like me." "People like you?" Alexander felt a flash of something. Anger on her behalf, or perhaps shame at the truth in her words. "Cleaning staff. Single mothers struggling to make rent. We're invisible to most people in those executive offices." "You're not invisible," Alexander said firmly. "And Emma's certainly not forgettable. She mistook me for her father, and offered me a PB&J. That's not something that happens every day, even in my admittedly unusual life. That earned him a real smile, small but genuine. She still talks about you. She calls you the nice man who is hungry. She wants to make you another lunch. Something warm unfurled in Alexander's chest. I'd like that. Sarah's eyes widened. I was joking. You don't have to. I'd like that, Alexander repeated. I meant what I said that morning. About being friends. You want to be friends with a 3-year-old? Sarah's tone was skeptical, but not unkind. And with her mother, if that's allowed. The air between them seemed to shift, charged with something Alexander couldn't quite name. Sarah looked down at her hands, twisting that wedding ring again. I don't know if I'm ready for. She started, then stopped. I'm not looking for anything. I can't. I'm not asking for anything, Alexander said gently. Just let me help. Please. I don't have many friends. I don't have any really. People either want something from me or they're intimidated by me. You're the first person in years to just be honest. Sarah was quiet for a long moment thinking. Finally, she said, Emma has a doctor's appointment next Thursday at 10. Nothing serious, just a checkup, but I have to take her, and I'll miss half my shift. I've been trying to figure out how to make up the hours. Take the shift off, Alexander said immediately. Paid. I can't keep accepting charity from you. It's not charity. It's... Alexander paused, searching for the right words. Call it an investment. You're raising what I suspect is going to be an extraordinary human being. That's valuable work. The world needs more people like Emma. Like you. Sarah's eyes filled again, but this time with something softer than grief. You're a very strange billionaire, Mr. Sterling. Alexander, he corrected. And I'll take that as a compliment. She laughed, a real laugh this time, and Alexander realized he wanted to hear that sound again. Okay, Alexander. But only if you let me cook you a proper dinner sometime. To say thank you. A real meal, not a PB&J. Deal. Alexander agreed, perhaps too quickly. Though for the record, that was the best PB&J I've ever had. They talked for another hour, the conversation flowing easily in the quiet break room. Sarah told him about Daniel, how they'd met in college, young and broke and ridiculously in love. How he'd proposed with a ring he'd saved 6 months to buy. How he'd cried when Emma was born, holding their daughter like she was made of glass and starlight. Alexander found himself sharing things he rarely spoke about, his complicated relationship with his late father, the pressure of carrying on a legacy, the loneliness that came with success. The way he'd watched his mother shut down after his father died, becoming a ghost in their family home. Is she still like that? Sarah asked gently. Your mother? She died 2 years ago, Alexander said. Heart attack. But I think she'd been dying slowly since Dad passed. Some people don't know how to live after loss. I'm scared of that, Sarah admitted quietly. Scared I'll just be going through the motions for Emma's sake, never really living again. But you are living, Alexander pointed out. You're working, you're raising your daughter, you're getting through each day. That's not just going through the motions. That's surviving. That's fighting. It doesn't feel like fighting. It feels like drowning. Then let someone throw you a rope. Sarah looked at him for a long moment, something shifting in her expression. Is that what you're doing? Throwing me a rope? Maybe I'm hoping you'll throw me one too, Alexander said honestly. Maybe we're both drowning in different oceans. When Sarah finally left to finish her shift, Alexander sat alone in the break room, staring at the cold coffee he'd never drunk. He pulled out his phone and made a call to his head of HR. I need you to review the compensation package for our janitorial staff, he said without preamble, particularly the night shift differential and benefits. I want a full report by Monday. Sir, is there a problem? His HR director asked, clearly confused by the late-night call. Yes, Alexander said. The problem is we're not paying these people enough for the work they do. Fix it. After he hung up, Alexander realized he was smiling. For the first time in years, he felt like he was doing something that mattered beyond stock prices and profit margins. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. His heart jumped until he realized it was from Margaret, his assistant, who'd apparently given Sarah his personal number. The message was simple. "Thank you for tonight. For listening. For seeing us. Sarah." Below it was a photo of Emma, fast asleep, clutching a worn stuffed rabbit, her face peaceful in sleep. Alexander saved the photo, then typed back, "Thank you for letting me." As he finally headed home to his empty penthouse apartment, Alexander realized that the hollow ache he'd carried for so long felt different somehow. Not gone, that would be too much to hope for. But less sharp. Less consuming. Maybe, he thought, this is what healing looks like. Not forgetting the loss, but finding something new worth holding on to. Worth fighting for. He didn't know what was happening between him and Sarah and Emma. Didn't know where this unlikely connection would lead. But for the first time in 5 years, he found himself looking forward to finding out. The next morning, Alexander's assistant did another double take when he came in whistling. Actually whistling, something she'd never heard him do before. "Good morning, Margaret," he said cheerfully. "Beautiful day, isn't it?" Margaret stared at him like he'd grown a second head. "Sir, are you feeling all right?" "Better than I have in years," Alexander said, and meant it. He had a lunch meeting with potential investors, a conference call with a Tokyo office, and a board presentation to prepare. But first, he stopped by the building's toy store in the lobby and bought a stuffed elephant with absurdly large ears. For Emma, he told himself. Just a small gift for a little girl who'd shared her father's lunch with a stranger. But as he rode the elevator up to his office, Alexander knew it was more than that. It was the first thread in what might become a lifeline for all of them. The dinner invitation came on a Saturday, delivered via text with an endearing lack of formality that made Alexander smile. "Emma insists you come for real food tomorrow at 5. Our apartment is tiny and the neighborhood isn't fancy, but the company is decent. No pressure if you're busy. Sarah." Alexander looked at his calendar. A charity gala he'd been dreading for months, the kind of event where he'd make small talk with people who wanted his money or his connections or both. He'd already donated a substantial check. His presence wasn't actually required. "I'll be there." "What can I bring?" he texted back. "Just yourself." Emma's been practicing her table manners all day. It's terrifying. Alexander found himself laughing out loud in his empty apartment, the sound echoing off the designer furniture and original artwork that suddenly seemed sterile and lifeless. The next evening, his driver looked puzzled when Alexander gave him an address in Queens, a working-class neighborhood far from the Manhattan penthouses and Hamptons estates where Alexander usually spent his time. "Are you sure about this address, sir?" the driver asked carefully. "I'm sure," Alexander confirmed, smoothing down his shirt. He'd agonized over what to wear, finally settling on dark jeans and a simple button-down. Casual, but not condescending, he hoped. He'd also stopped at a bakery for dessert and a toy store for a children's book, second-guessing both choices a dozen times. Sarah's apartment building was a modest walk-up with fading paint and a front door that didn't quite close right. Alexander climbed 3 flights of stairs, the sounds of family life filtering through thin walls, television laughter, arguing couples, crying babies. It was so far removed from his world of silence and luxury that it felt almost foreign. Then he knocked on apartment 3C, and Emma's delighted shriek from inside made everything else fade away. "He's here. Mama, he's here." The door flew open, and there was Emma, wearing what appeared to be her best dress, purple with butterflies, slightly too small, the hem uneven like it had been let down more than once. Her hair was in those same lopsided pigtails, and she was bouncing on her toes with excitement. "You came?" Emma grabbed his hand with sticky fingers, pulling him inside. "I helped make chicken. I stir the rice. Come see." Sarah appeared from what must have been the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel, looking flustered and beautiful in a way that made Alexander's breath catch. She wore jeans and a soft blue sweater, her hair down around her shoulders, and there was a smudge of flour on her cheek. "I'm sorry," Sarah said, trying to extract Emma from Alexander's leg, where she'd attached herself. "She's been watching for you since 4 o'clock. "Don't apologize," Alexander said, feeling absurdly pleased by Emma's enthusiasm. He held up his offerings. "I brought dessert. And I hope it's okay, but I saw this book and thought of Emma." Sarah took the bakery box and book, her eyes going soft when she saw the title. The Velveteen Rabbit. "This was my favorite as a child." "Mine too," Alexander admitted. "My father used to read it to me." Something passed between them, a moment of understanding, of shared memory and loss. Then Emma was tugging on Alexander's hand again, demanding he come see her drawings on the refrigerator, her stuffed animals lined up on the couch, her special rocks collection. The apartment was indeed tiny, maybe 700 square feet total, but it was warm and lived in a way Alexander's sprawling penthouse had never been. There were photos everywhere: Sarah and Daniel's wedding, Emma as a newborn, family moments frozen in time. Alexander noticed Sarah had left them all up, not hidden away, but celebrated. Dinner was simple but delicious: roasted chicken, rice, vegetables. They ate at a small table that barely fit the three of them, Emma chattering nonstop about her preschool, her best friend Mia, the caterpillar she'd found at the park. "And then it made a crystal," Emma announced seriously. "A chrysalis," Sarah corrected gently. "That's what I said. A crystal. And then it's gonna be a butterfly." Magic. Alexander found himself completely charmed, asking questions about the caterpillar's name, Steve, its favorite food, leaves, obviously, and whether Steve would visit after becoming a butterfly. Emma was hopeful but realistic about Steve's busy schedule. After dinner, while Sarah cleared the table despite Alexander's protests that he should help, Emma crawled into Alexander's lap on the couch with the Velveteen Rabbit. "Read it?" she asked, turning those big brown eyes on him. Alexander's throat went tight. "Of course." As he read about the toy rabbit who wanted to become real through being loved, Emma's head grew heavy against his chest, her breathing evening out. Sarah came to sit beside them, close enough that Alexander could smell her shampoo, something simple and clean like vanilla and honey. "She usually doesn't warm up to people this quickly," Sarah said softly. "But with you, it's like she's known you forever." "Maybe she's looking for—" Alexander paused, not wanting to overstep. "A father figure," Sarah finished for him. "I know. It worries me. I don't want her to get hurt if, when I leave," Alexander asked quietly. Sarah looked at him, vulnerable and honest. "People in your world don't usually stick around in mine." Alexander set the book aside carefully, mindful of the sleeping child in his arms. "What if I'm not like most people in my world?" "Aren't you?" It was a fair question. Alexander thought about his life, the endless cycle of work and obligation, the shallow relationships, the way he'd kept everyone at arm's length for so long. He thought about who he'd been 6 weeks ago, before a little girl mistook him for her father and cracked open something in his carefully constructed walls. "I used to be," he said finally. "But I'm tired of it. Tired of being alone. Tired of pretending that success and money are enough." He looked at Emma's peaceful face, then at Sarah's guarded hope. "What if I told you that having dinner in this tiny apartment, reading to your daughter, has been the best evening I've had in years? Would you believe me?" Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "I want to, but I'm scared, Alexander. Scared of letting you in, and then having you realize this isn't what you want. That we're not enough. Not enough." Alexander felt something fierce rise in his chest. "Sarah, you're raising an incredible child on your own, while dealing with grief that would break most people. You work all night, and still manage to make a home that feels warmer than any place I've ever lived. You're not enough. You're extraordinary." A tear slipped down Sarah's cheek. "Daniel used to say things like that." He was right. They sat in silence for a moment, Emma sleeping between them, the weight of everything unsaid hanging in the air. Finally, Sarah reached out and took Alexander's hand. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay, let's try this. Whatever this is. But slowly. For Emma's sake." "For all our sakes," Alexander agreed. "I don't know what I'm doing, Sarah. I don't know how to be what you and Emma need." "Neither do I," Sarah admitted. "I don't know how to let someone new into the space Daniel left. But maybe we figure it out together?" "Together," Alexander repeated, liking the sound of it. Over the next few months, Alexander became a regular fixture in their lives. Sunday dinners became a tradition. Then Saturday park visits. Then Wednesday evening story times when Alexander would read to Emma while Sarah cooked or folded laundry. He learned that Emma loved blueberry pancakes but hated bananas, that she was afraid of the dark but brave about doctors, that she could sing the entire Frozen soundtrack but got shy around strangers. He learned that Sarah took her coffee black, that she hummed when she was nervous, that she still cried sometimes when she thought no one was watching. And they learned about him, that he couldn't cook to save his life but was excellent at assembling complicated toys, that he'd always wanted siblings but had been an only child, that success had come at the cost of almost everything else in his life. Alexander found himself rearranging his schedule around their small family. He left board meetings early to make it to Emma's preschool play. He traded black tie galas for pizza dinners and Disney movie nights. His social circle, those shallow connections he'd maintained for years, noticed and commented. Some with amusement, others with disdain. He didn't care. "You're different lately," his best friend Marcus observed over drinks one evening. "Happier. Less robotic." "I met someone," Alexander admitted. "Thank God." "Who is she?" "Anyone I know." "She's..." Alexander paused, realizing how impossible it would be to explain. "She's a single mother, works as a night custodian, has a 3-year-old daughter who thinks I'm magic because I can reach the top shelf." Marcus stared at him. "You're joking." "I'm not." "Alexander, buddy, I say this with love. What are you doing? You can date anyone. Models, heiresses, CEOs. "I don't want anyone else," Alexander said firmly. "I want Sarah. I want Emma. I want the life they're offering me." "Which is what?" "Playing house in Queens." Alexander felt anger flash through him. "Careful, Marcus." Marcus held up his hands. "I'm just saying, you're Alexander Sterling. You have responsibilities. A reputation. What will the board think? Your investors?" "I don't care what they think," Alexander said, and realized it was true. "For the first time in my life, I'm choosing something that makes me happy instead of something that looks good on paper. If they have a problem with that, they can take it up with me." The truth was, Alexander had never been happier. Oh, there were challenges. Emma had nightmares sometimes and called for her daddy, breaking all their hearts. Sarah had moments where the grief hit her fresh and new, and she'd withdraw for days. Alexander himself still struggled with feeling like an intruder in a family's sacred space, stepping into shoes that had belonged to a man he'd never met, but whose loss he felt in every photograph, every story, every quiet moment when Sarah touched her wedding ring. But there were also moments of pure, unexpected joy. Like when Emma started calling him Alexander Daddy, not quite ready to drop one but wanting to claim the other. Like when Sarah laughed at his terrible jokes, a real laugh that lit up her whole face. Like the first time Emma fell asleep holding both their hands, one small bridge between her past and her possible future. 3 months after that first Sunday dinner, Alexander took Sarah to Daniel's grave. It was her idea. Actually, she'd mentioned wanting to visit but dreading going alone, and Alexander had offered to come along before he could second-guess himself. They stood before the simple headstone, Daniel Martinez, beloved husband and father, while Emma picked dandelions nearby, humming to herself. "Daniel," Sarah said softly, her hand on the cold marble. I want you to meet someone. This is Alexander. He's been taking care of us. The way you would have wanted someone to if you couldn't. Alexander felt emotion clog his throat. He'd expected to feel awkward or intrusive, but instead, he felt a strange sense of peace. I promise, Alexander said quietly, speaking to a man he'd never met but whose legacy he was trying to honor. I promise I'll take care of them. Both of them. I'll never try to replace you. I couldn't if I wanted to. But I'll love them. I'll protect them. I'll be there. Sarah was crying openly now, and Alexander pulled her into his arms while Emma brought over a fistful of dandelions to put on Daddy's grave. Daddy, this is Alexander, Emma announced seriously. He reads stories and makes Mama smile. I think you'd be friends. It was such a simple, innocent statement, but it broke something open in Alexander. He found himself crying too, for the man who died too young, for the family fractured by loss, for all the ways life was both cruel and beautiful. They stayed for an hour, Sarah telling Daniel about their lives, Emma showing him her new shoes, Alexander standing witness to a love that death hadn't diminished. As they left, Emma took both their hands, swinging between them happily, already moving forward the way children could. But Sarah looked back one more time, and Alexander saw her lips move in a silent goodbye, or maybe a thank you. To Daniel, for the life they'd shared. To the universe for sending Alexander. To herself for having the courage to try again. That night, after Emma was asleep and they were sitting on Sarah's worn couch, Sarah finally took off her wedding ring. She didn't throw it away or hide it. She put it on a chain around her neck, close to her heart but no longer a barrier. I'll always love him, she said, looking at Alexander with eyes that held both sorrow and hope. I know, Alexander said. I'm not asking you not to. What are you asking for? Alexander thought about it carefully. A chance. To build something new without erasing what was. To be part of your family, however that looks. To love you both if you'll let me. Sarah leaned forward and kissed him, soft and sweet and full of possibility. When they pulled apart, she was smiling through her tears. Okay, she whispered. Yes. Let's build something new. And for the first time since that morning in the lobby when a little girl had mistaken him for her father, Alexander felt like he truly belonged somewhere. Not in boardrooms or penthouses, but here, in this tiny apartment in Queens, with a woman learning to love again and a child who'd shown him what really mattered. He'd spent years building an empire. Now he was learning to build a family. And he was discovering that the latter was infinitely more valuable than the former had ever been. The first real fight happened on a Tuesday night in November, 6 months into their relationship. Alexander had made plans, a surprise trip to Disney World for Emma's 4th birthday. He'd booked a suite at the Grand Floridian, made reservations at Cinderella's castle, arranged for a private character experience. He'd been so excited to tell them, imagining Emma's face when she saw the Magic Kingdom for the first time. Absolutely not, Sarah said flatly when he revealed the plans. Alexander blinked, completely blindsided. What? Why not? Emma would love. I can't accept that, Alexander. Do you know how much that kind of trip costs? It's too much. I can afford. That's not the point. Sarah's voice rose, and Alexander could see the frustration and something deeper, shame, maybe, or pride in her eyes. I can't give her things like that. Every time you do something extravagant, it just highlights the massive gap between your life and ours. It makes me feel like I'm failing her. You're not failing anyone, Alexander said, frustrated himself now. I want to do this. I want to give her experiences, make her happy. She was happy before you. The words came out sharper than Sarah intended, and Alexander felt them like a physical blow. Sarah immediately looked horrified. I didn't mean. Didn't you? Alexander stood, pacing the small living room. Is that what this is about? You don't want me disrupting your perfect little life? Perfect. Sarah laughed bitterly. My husband died, Alexander. I work nights cleaning toilets, so I can afford to keep a roof over my daughter's head. I'm drowning in medical debt. Nothing about my life is perfect, but it's mine, and I built it myself, and I don't need you swooping in like some kind of savior. I'm not trying to save you. Then what are you doing here? The question hung between them, raw and real. Because sometimes I think you're playing house with us. That we're some kind of project to you. The poor widow and her sad little daughter that you can rescue and feel good about. Alexander felt like she'd punched him. How can you say that? After everything. Because you don't get it. Sarah was crying now, angry tears streaming down her face. You can't understand what it's like to accept help from someone when you've always had to do everything yourself. To want to give your child the world, but no you can't. To have someone else do it instead and feel grateful and resentful all at once. Then help me understand, Alexander pleaded. I'm trying, Sarah. I'm trying so hard to do this right, but you won't let me in all the way. You keep one foot out the door, ready to run if this gets too real. Maybe, because I'm terrified, Sarah shouted, then immediately covered her mouth, glancing toward Emma's room where she was sleeping. They stood in awful silence, breathing hard. The truth finally spilled out between them. Terrified of what? Alexander asked more quietly. Sarah sank onto the couch, her anger deflating into something more vulnerable. Of needing you. Of Emma getting so attached that if you leave, it will break her heart. Of loving you so much that losing you would destroy me the way losing Daniel did. She looked up at him with red-rimmed eyes. Don't you see? I survived Daniel's death because I had no choice. Emma needed me. But if I let myself need you, really need you, and then you're gone, I don't think I'd survive it twice. Alexander felt his own eyes burning. He sat beside her, careful not to touch, giving her space. I'm not going anywhere. You can't promise that. Nobody can. You're right, Alexander admitted. I can't promise I won't die. I can't promise life won't throw something at us that tears us apart. But I can promise I won't choose to leave. I can promise that I love you and Emma more than I've loved anything in my life. And I can promise that I'm all in, Sarah. Completely, terrifyingly all in. Sarah was quiet for a long time. I'm scared I'm not enough for you. That eventually you'll realize you can have someone who fits better in your world. Someone who... There is no one else, Alexander interrupted gently. Don't you get it? I spent 33 years in that world, and I was miserable. I was successful and respected, and completely empty inside. Then Emma grabbed my hand and called me Daddy, and you looked at me like I was a person and not a bank account, and everything changed. You didn't fill some void I didn't know I had. You showed me what actually matters. What I'd been missing while I was busy building an empire that meant nothing. It means something, Sarah said softly. What you've built. The jobs you provide, the innovations, It means something, Alexander agreed. But it's not everything. You and Emma, you're everything. Fresh tears spilled down Sarah's cheeks. I'm sorry I said you were playing house. I know you're not. I'm still learning how to do this. How to let someone love us again. So we learn together, Alexander said, finally reaching for her hand. And about Disney, I hear you. I understand. Maybe instead of the Grand Floridian, we do a weekend road trip. Somewhere closer, cheaper. Or maybe we skip the trip entirely and just celebrate here. The point isn't the money I spend. It's the memories we make. Sarah squeezed his hand. She would lose her mind over Disney World. She'd lose her mind over a trip to the grocery store if we made it an adventure, Alexander pointed out. Sarah laughed wetly. True. Last week she pretended the shopping cart was a spaceship. See? Cheap entertainment. They sat together in the quiet apartment, hands linked, breathing synchronized. Alexander had faced down hostile corporate raiders, had negotiated billion-dollar deals, had stood firm against people trying to destroy him. But nothing had been as hard or as important as this, learning to love and be loved, to merge two broken pieces into something new and whole. I have an idea, Sarah said eventually. About Disney. What if we save for it together? You put in some, I put in some, and when we've saved enough, we go. Emma learns about working toward goals. I don't feel like I'm taking charity, and you still get to spoil her rotten. How long would that take? Sarah bit her lip, calculating. Maybe 2 years? If I can pick up some extra shifts. 1 year, Alexander countered. I'll match whatever you save, dollar for dollar. That's still too generous. It's a compromise, Alexander said firmly. Which is what people in relationships do, right? Sarah smiled, real and warm. Right. Okay. 1 year. 1 year, Alexander agreed. And in the meantime, I promise to consult you before planning any more surprises. Even small ones? The small ones I'm keeping. A man's got to maintain some mystery. They spent the night talking, really talking, about their fears and expectations and the 1,000 small adjustments they'd each need to make. Sarah admitted she sometimes resented how easily things came to Alexander, how he could solve with money problems that kept her up at night. Alexander admitted he sometimes felt like an outsider in their little family, like he was playing a role Daniel had originated. You're not replacing him, Sarah said firmly. You couldn't if you tried. What you and Emma have, what you and I have, it's completely different. It doesn't diminish what I had with Daniel. It's just new. And that's okay. That's good, even. Does Emma think that? Because sometimes when she calls me Alexander Daddy, I wonder if she's confused. If I should correct her. Don't, Sarah said quickly. That's her way of making sense of it. Of honoring both of you. Daniel will always be her daddy who died. But you're becoming her daddy who's here. Both things can be true. The conversation marked a turning point. They'd weathered their first real conflict and come out stronger, more honest. It wasn't the last fight they'd have. There were arguments about discipline. Alexander was a pushover, Sarah accused him. About money, always about money. About how much time Alexander spent at work versus with them. But they learned to fight fair, to speak their truth without cruelty, to apologize and mean it. They learned that love wasn't always easy or comfortable, that sometimes it required uncomfortable growth and painful honesty. Emma, meanwhile, was blossoming. Therapy had helped her process her grief in age-appropriate ways, and having Alexander in her life gave her a sense of security she'd lost when Daniel died. She still had hard days, moments when she'd cry for her first daddy, or look at photos and ask questions Sarah answered through tears. But she also had good days. Days when she'd drag Alexander to her tea parties and make him wear a plastic tiara. Days when she'd climb into his lap and demand he tell her stories about when he was little. Days when she'd declare that she had the best family in the whole world because she had a mommy and an Alexander daddy and a daddy in heaven watching over them all. For Christmas that year, Alexander didn't buy extravagant gifts. Instead, he framed a photo of the three of them at the park, Sarah laughing at something Emma had said, Emma mid-jump on the swings, Alexander pushing her. All of them caught in a moment of pure, unguarded joy. He gave one to Sarah and kept one for his office, replacing the corporate achievement awards that had previously decorated his desk. His business associates noticed. His board members noticed. The society pages definitely noticed when Alexander Sterling, one of Manhattan's most eligible bachelors, started bringing a cleaning woman and her daughter to charity events instead of the usual rotation of socialites. The whispers were cruel sometimes. Questions about what he saw in her. Speculation that it was a phase or a publicity stunt. Condescending remarks about Sarah's background, her job, her clothes that were nice but not designer. Alexander heard them all and didn't care. Let them talk. Let them wonder. He knew the truth, that Sarah was worth more than any of them, that Emma's unconditional love was more valuable than all their empty praise, that the life he was building with them was realer than anything he'd had before. But Sarah heard the whispers too, and they stung. They're right, you know. she said one night after a particularly brutal charity gala where she'd been snubbed by several society matrons. "I don't belong in your world." "Then we'll build a new world," Alexander said simply. "One that has room for both of us." And slowly, painfully, that's what they did. Alexander started delegating more at work, promoting younger executives he trusted, setting boundaries he'd never set before. He stopped attending events that felt shallow, started investing in causes that mattered to people like Sarah: affordable housing, healthcare access, support for single parents. Sarah, meanwhile, went back to school. Alexander had offered to pay, but she'd insisted on student loans, on doing it herself. She was studying early childhood education, planning to become a teacher. It was slow going with night shifts and Emma to care for, but she was determined. "I want Emma to see that it's never too late to chase your dreams," Sarah explained. "That losing someone doesn't mean you stop becoming who you're meant to be." Alexander had never admired anyone more. On the anniversary of Daniel's death, they went to the cemetery together. All three of them. Emma brought flowers she'd picked herself. Dandelions again, weeds that Daniel probably would have loved. Sarah brought a letter she'd written, telling Daniel about her life, about Alexander, asking for his blessing even though she knew she didn't need it. And Alexander brought a promise, spoken silently to a man he'd never met but whose family he cherished. "I'll love them with everything I have. I'll honor your memory by taking care of what you left behind. And I'll make sure Emma knows her first daddy was a hero who loved her more than life itself." That night, Emma asked Alexander a question that stopped his heart. "Alexander, Daddy, when people die, do they know things in heaven?" "I think so, sweetheart." "Why?" Emma's lip trembled. "Does my first daddy know about you? Is he mad that you're my daddy now, too?" Sarah started to answer, but Alexander gently shook his head. This question was for him. He pulled Emma into his lap, choosing his words carefully. "You know what I think? I think your first daddy sent me to you. I think he was watching from heaven and saw you, and your mommy needed someone to love you, and he picked me for the job." "Really?" Emma's eyes went wide. "Really? Because your first daddy loved you so much that even from heaven, he wanted to make sure you were taken care of. And I'm so grateful he chose me. Because you and your mommy are the best things that ever happened to me." Emma thought about this seriously. "So, you're like, a present? From my first daddy?" "Yeah," Alexander said, his throat tight with emotion. "I guess I am. We're all presents to each other." Emma seemed satisfied with this explanation. She kissed Alexander's cheek and climbed down to play with her toys, already moving on the way children do. But Sarah was crying, and Alexander pulled her close. "That was perfect," she whispered. "Thank you." "I meant it," Alexander said. "Every word." As the year rolled toward their Disney trip savings goal, Alexander realized that somewhere along the way, he'd stopped thinking of this as temporary or experimental. This was his life now. This was his family. Sarah and Emma weren't a phase or a departure from his real life. They were the realest thing he'd ever had. And when he looked at the future now, he didn't see endless, lonely success. He saw birthday parties and school plays and family dinners. He saw Sarah graduating from college while he and Emma cheered in the audience. He saw growing old with someone who taught him that wealth wasn't measured in dollars, but in love given and received. He saw home. Finally, after 33 years of searching, he'd found home in the most unexpected place, in a tiny apartment in Queens, in the arms of a widow learning to love again, in the heart of a little girl who'd grabbed his hand and changed his life forever. The ring had been burning a hole in Alexander's pocket for 3 weeks. He'd agonized over it for months before that. Was it too soon? Would Sarah say yes? Was he being selfish, pushing for more when she was still healing? Should he ask Emma first? Would Daniel's memory make this impossible? 1,000 doubts plagued him, but one certainty remained. He wanted to spend the rest of his life with Sarah Martinez and her extraordinary daughter. It was April, A year and a half since Emma had first mistaken him for her father in the lobby. They'd saved enough for their Disney trip. It turned out that when they combined forces, a year was more than enough time. The trip was planned for next month, and Alexander had thought about proposing there, at the Magic Kingdom, all fairy tale and fireworks. But then something happened that changed his timeline entirely. He'd come over for their usual Wednesday dinner, letting himself in with the key Sarah had given him 3 months ago. Emma was at a friend's house for a playdate, and Sarah was home alone, a rare occurrence. He found her sitting on the bathroom floor, crying so hard she was shaking. "Sarah?" Alexander dropped to his knees beside her, heart hammering with fear. "What's wrong? Are you hurt?" She shook her head, unable to speak, and thrust something at him. It took Alexander a moment to understand what he was looking at. A pregnancy test. Positive. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. "I'm sorry," Sarah gasped out between sobs. "I'm so sorry. I know we've been careful, but that stomach bug last month, my antibiotics, and I didn't even think." "Sarah," Alexander interrupted, his voice rough with emotion. "Why are you sorry?" "Because this wasn't the plan. We were taking things slow, and you didn't sign up for this, and I know you probably want kids eventually, but not like this, not." "Sarah." Alexander took her face in his hands, forcing her to look at him. "I love you. Do you know that? I love you so much it terrifies me. And if you're pregnant with my child, that's... God, Sarah, that's everything." She stared at him like she couldn't quite believe what she was hearing. "You're not upset?" "Upset." Alexander laughed, the sound bordering on hysterical. "I'm terrified. I have no idea how to be a father. But upset? No. Never." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "Are you okay with this? Is this what you want?" Sarah's hand went to her stomach, unconscious and protective. "I never thought I'd have another baby. After Daniel died, I assumed it was just me and Emma forever. But now..." Fresh tears spilled over. "I'm scared. What if something goes wrong? What if I'm a terrible mother to 2 kids? What if Emma hates having a sibling? What if you realize you don't want this life after all?" "Hey," Alexander said gently. "We're going to figure it out. Together. All of it. And Emma's going to be an amazing big sister. As for me not wanting this..." He pulled the ring box from his pocket, where it had lived for weeks. "I was going to wait until Disney. Make it magical and perfect. But I think maybe right here, right now, on your bathroom floor while you tell me we're having a baby, I think this is more perfect than any fairy tale." Sarah's eyes went wide as he opened the box, revealing a simple but beautiful diamond ring. "I'm doing this backward," Alexander said, his own voice shaking now. "I should ask Emma first. I should plan something romantic. I should." "Alexander," Sarah whispered. "I love you, Sarah Martinez. I love your strength and your kindness, and the way you've taught me what actually matters in life. I love how you make the best of everything, how you love Emma so fiercely, how you've let me into your heart even when it scared you. I love the family we've built and the future we're creating. And I love this baby we made, this impossible, unplanned, absolutely perfect baby." He took a shaky breath. "I want to be your husband. I want to be Emma's dad, not just Alexander Daddy, but really her dad if she'll have me. I want to raise this baby with you. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night. I want to fight about whose turn it is to do dishes and decide together what color to paint the nursery. I want everything, Sarah. The messy, complicated, beautiful everything. Will you marry me?" Sarah was crying too hard to speak at first. She just nodded over and over until finally she managed. "Yes. Yes, you ridiculous man, of course yes." Alexander slid the ring onto her finger with shaking hands, and then they were both crying and laughing on the bathroom floor, holding each other while the magnitude of it all settled over them. "We have to tell Emma," Sarah said eventually. "We have to tell Emma," Alexander agreed. Both things. That we're getting married, and that she's going to be a big sister. That's a lot for a 4-year-old to process. She's going to flip out, Sarah predicted. She's been asking me for a baby sister for months. She even prayed for one. Really? Really? She told me God would send her a sister when the time was right. Sarah laughed wetly. I guess the time is right. They told Emma that night, sitting her down after dinner with serious faces that immediately made her nervous. Am I in trouble? Emma asked, her little brow furrowed. No, sweetheart, Sarah assured her. We have some big news. Actually, 2 pieces of big news. Emma perked up. Good news? Very good news, Alexander confirmed. Emma, you know how much I love you and your mommy, right? Emma nodded seriously. You love us to the moon and back and to infinity. That's right. Well, I asked your mommy if she would marry me, if we could all be a family forever. And she said yes. Emma's eyes went huge. You're gonna be my forever daddy? The words hit Alexander straight in the heart. If you want me to be. I want it. Emma launched herself at Alexander, throwing her little arms around his neck. I want it so much. Can I call you daddy now? Just daddy. Alexander looked at Sarah over Emma's head, asking the question with his eyes. Sarah was crying again, pregnancy hormones, Alexander was learning, but she nodded. You can call me daddy, Alexander said, his voice thick. I would be so honored to be your daddy. Emma pulled back, beaming. What's the other good news? Sarah took a deep breath. Well, sweetheart, you know how you've been asking for a baby sister? Emma's whole body went still. Yes, God answered your prayer. You're going to be a big sister. There's a baby growing in mommy's tummy right now. For a moment, Emma just stared. Then she screamed, an ear-piercing shriek of pure joy that probably had the neighbors worried. She started jumping up and down, unable to contain her excitement. A baby. A real baby. Is it a sister? When does it come? Can I teach it things? Will it sleep in my room? Does it like princesses? Sarah and Alexander laughed, fielding her rapid-fire questions as best they could. Yes, they'd find out if it was a sister or brother in a few months. The baby would come in about 7 months. Yes, she could teach it things. They'd have to figure out the sleeping arrangements. And they'd have to wait and see about the princesses. Emma finally calmed down enough to put her hand on Sarah's still flat stomach. Hi, baby, she whispered. I'm your big sister, Emma. I'm gonna take such good care of you. And this is our daddy. He's the best daddy in the whole world because he reads stories and makes mommy smile, and he's gonna love you so much. Alexander had to leave the room for a moment, overwhelmed by the weight of it all. He stood in the tiny kitchen, hands braced on the counter, trying to breathe through the emotion. Sarah found him there. You okay? I'm going to be a father, Alexander said, the reality of it hitting him fully. A real father. Not just stepping into the role, but, Sarah, there's going to be a baby. A tiny human that's half you and half me. I don't know how to do this. Neither did I the first time, Sarah reminded him. Or the second time, really. We'll figure it out together. What if I mess it up? What if I'm terrible at it? Sarah took his hands. You won't be. You're already an amazing father to Emma. You think that's different somehow? The biology doesn't matter, Alexander. What matters is showing up, being present, loving them no matter what. You already do that. Over the next few months, everything changed and yet stayed wonderfully the same. They decided to wait to get married until after the baby came. Sarah didn't want to be hugely pregnant in a wedding dress, and they were in no rush. They were already a family. The paperwork could wait. Alexander moved out of his penthouse and into a modest house in Queens, close to Sarah's apartment. It was smaller than what he was used to, but still spacious enough for a growing family. Emma was ecstatic to have a backyard. We can get a swing set, she announced. And a dog. Can we get a dog, Daddy? Maybe, Alexander hedged, looking to Sarah for help. We'll see, Sarah said, the universal parent response. The pregnancy wasn't easy. Sarah had morning sickness that lasted all day, swollen ankles, and exhaustion that hit her like a truck. Alexander did everything he could, cooking, badly, cleaning, taking Emma to all her activities so Sarah could rest. His board of directors was baffled by his sudden schedule changes. He left work at 5 now, no exceptions. He took Wednesdays off entirely for Sarah's prenatal appointments. He declined 3 international business trips. "I have priorities," he told them firmly when questioned. "My family comes first." Some understood. Others didn't. A few board members grumbled about his lack of dedication. Alexander invited them to find another CEO if they weren't satisfied. None took him up on it. He was too valuable, even working reduced hours. Emma took her role as big sister seriously. She talked to Sarah's growing belly every day, telling the baby about her day, singing songs, reading, or pretending to read stories. She'd insisted they set up the nursery in the room next to hers, so I can hear if the baby needs me. They found out at 20 weeks that they were having a boy. A brother? Emma had looked initially disappointed, but then brightened. "I can teach him boy things. And girl things. He'll be the best little brother ever." Choosing a name was harder. They'd go through lists, but nothing felt right. Until one night, Sarah was going through an old photo album with Emma, showing her pictures of Daniel. "Tell me about my first daddy again," Emma requested, as she often did. Sarah smiled, touching Daniel's face in the photograph. "Your daddy was brave and kind and funny. He loved you more than anything in the world. And you know what his name means?" "Daniel means God is my judge." "What does Alexander mean?" Emma asked. They looked it up together. Defender of mankind. Emma thought about this seriously. "So my daddy's names both mean strong things. Protecting things." "I guess they do," Sarah agreed. Later that night, when Emma was asleep, Sarah told Alexander about the conversation. "What if we named the baby something that means protection too? Something that honors both of you?" They researched for weeks. Finally, they found it. Gabriel. It meant, "God is my strength." "Gabriel Alexander Martinez Sterling," Sarah said, trying it out. "That's a lot of name for a little baby," Alexander said. "He'll grow into it." Gabriel for strength. Alexander for you. Martinez for Daniel. Sterling for the future. "It's perfect," Alexander agreed. Gabriel arrived 3 weeks early, on a snowy December morning. Sarah's water broke at 4 a.m., and the rush to the hospital was chaotic. Emma crying because she was scared, Alexander trying to remember everything from the birthing classes while also keeping Emma calm, Sarah timing contractions, and somehow being the calmest one despite being in labor. Emma stayed with Sarah's mother during the delivery. 8 hours later, Gabriel Alexander Martinez Sterling made his entrance into the world, screaming his little head off, all 7 pounds and 3 ounces of him. Alexander cried when the nurse placed his son in his arms. His son. This tiny, perfect human who shared his DNA, who had Sarah's nose and a shock of dark hair and the tiniest fingers Alexander had ever seen. "Hi, Gabriel," Alexander whispered. "I'm your dad. I'm so happy to meet you." When Emma came to meet her brother, she approached the hospital bassinet with reverence, like Gabriel was made of glass. "He's so small," she breathed. "You were that small once," Sarah told her. Emma gently touched Gabriel's hand, and he reflexively gripped her finger. Her face lit up with wonder. "He likes me." "He loves you," Alexander corrected. "You're his big sister. That's a very important job." "I know," Emma said seriously. "I've been practicing." The first few months were exhausting. Gabriel had colic and cried for hours every night. Emma struggled with jealousy sometimes, acting out to get attention. Sarah was dealing with postpartum depression that she tried to hide, but Alexander noticed. Money, despite Alexander's wealth, was a source of stress. Sarah still insisted on contributing, still carried student loans and Daniel's medical debt. They fought sometimes, short-tempered from lack of sleep. They cried sometimes, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what they were trying to do. They doubted sometimes, wondering if they'd made the right choices. But they also loved. God, how they loved! Alexander would come home from work to find Emma reading to Gabriel, even though he was too young to understand. Sarah singing lullabies while she paced with the crying baby. The four of them piled on the couch on Sunday mornings, still in pajamas, watching cartoons. Small moments that meant everything. On Gabriel's first Christmas, Alexander gave Sarah a gift that made her cry. The deed to their house, put in her name as well as his. Equal ownership. Equal partnership. I don't want you to ever feel like you're living in my house or raising our children in my space, Alexander explained. This is ours. Everything is ours. Sarah's gift to him was a photo album she'd made by hand. Pictures of their journey, from that first morning in the lobby to their bathroom floor proposal to bringing Gabriel home from the hospital. But she'd also included photos of Daniel, of Emma's early years, of a family that had existed before Alexander. This is our history, Sarah said. All of it. The pain and the loss and the new beginning. I want Gabriel to grow up knowing all of it. Knowing that love doesn't replace other love, it adds to it. Alexander held the album like it was precious because it was the story of how broken pieces could come together into something whole. How loss could coexist with joy. How a little girl's mistake could change 3 lives forever. Emma crawled into his lap, and Gabriel was sleeping in Sarah's arms, and they sat there in the glow of the Christmas tree, a family built from grief and grace, and the courage to try again. I love you, Alexander told them. All of you. More than I knew it was possible to love. We love you too, Daddy, Emma said, and rested her head on his chest. And Alexander realized that he'd spent 33 years building the wrong things. Success and status and wealth, they meant nothing compared to this. To being someone's daddy. To being Sarah's partner. To building a life that mattered not because of what he'd accomplished, but because of who he'd loved. The best investment he'd ever made wasn't a company or a property. It was a peanut butter and jelly sandwich shared with a grieving child and the family that grew from that one small act of kindness. 3 years after Gabriel's birth, on a crisp October morning, the Sterling Martinez family made their way to the cemetery. It had become their tradition, visiting Daniel's grave on the anniversary of his death, bringing flowers and stories and a love that had grown in the spaces he'd left behind. Emma was 7 now, long-legged and confident, holding 3-year-old Gabriel's hand as they walked through the cemetery gates. Sarah walked beside Alexander, her hand in his, the simple gold band on her finger catching the autumn sunlight. They'd gotten married the previous spring in a small ceremony at the same cemetery, with Daniel's blessing sought, and somehow felt. Why do we visit the grave, Daddy? Gabriel asked as he did every year, trying to understand. Alexander knelt down to his son's level. Because Emma's first daddy is part of our family, even though he's in heaven. We want to tell him about our lives and thank him for the gifts he gave us. What gifts? Gabriel asked. Emma answered before Alexander could. He gave us Mommy. And he gave us me. And he gave us you in a way, because if he hadn't, if things were different. She trailed off, the logic getting too complicated. He gave us love, Sarah simplified, her voice thick with emotion. He loved me and we made Emma, and that love is part of everything good in our lives. They stood before the headstone, which Alexander had replaced with a larger one that read, Daniel Martinez, beloved husband, father, and friend, forever in our hearts. The flowers they brought were a mix, roses from Sarah, dandelions from Emma, still, after all these years, daisies from Gabriel, and from Alexander, forget-me-nots. Each addition to the grave was a testament to the family's growth, to the way they'd woven Daniel's memory into their present. Hi, Daniel, Sarah said, touching the cool marble. Another year. Can you believe it? Emma's in 2nd grade now. She's reading at a 5th grade level. You'd be so proud. She wants to be a teacher just like me. I graduated last year, by the way. I'm teaching kindergarten at Emma's school. It's chaos and beautiful, and everything I hoped it would be. She paused, gathering her thoughts. Gabriel's growing like a weed. He looks like Alexander but acts like you sometimes, fearless and silly, and so full of joy.
He asks about you.
We've told him stories, shown him pictures. He knows he has two daddies, one in heaven and one here with us. Emma stepped forward.
Hi, First Daddy.
I miss you. But I'm okay. Better than okay. I have Daddy Alexander now, and he's really good at being a dad. He comes to all my soccer games and helps with homework and tucks me in every night. I think you picked good when you picked him for us. Gabriel, not fully understanding but wanting to participate, added his own message. Hi, Heaven Daddy. I drawed you a picture. He held up a crayon drawing of what might have been people or possibly aliens. It was hard to tell. Alexander was the last to speak. He'd done this for 3 years now, but it never got easier. Daniel, he started, his voice rough. I hope I'm doing right by them. By your girls. By our family. I've tried so hard to honor your memory while also being present in their lives. It's a strange thing, loving a woman who loved you first, raising a daughter who calls me dad but has your eyes. He took a breath. I want you to know that I don't take any of it for granted. Every day with them is a gift I know you would have cherished. Every milestone with Emma that you're missing, I witness it and I think of you. I tell her stories about you based on what Sarah shared, keeping you alive for her. And Gabriel, I'm raising him to know he had a first father who was brave and good, even though they never met. Alexander's voice cracked. Thank you for Emma. Thank you for loving Sarah and showing her what a good man looks like. Thank you for whatever cosmic force sent her to that building lobby that morning. I'd like to think you had a hand in it somehow, that you saw this lonely, lost billionaire and thought, he needs them, and they need him. If that's true, thank you. Thank you for trusting me with your family. Sarah was crying openly now, and Alexander pulled her close. Emma hugged their legs, and Gabriel, sensing the emotion even if he didn't understand it, wrapped his small arms around them all. We should tell him the news, Sarah said softly. Alexander nodded. Together, they said, we're having another baby. Emma squealed. They just told her that morning. I'm gonna be a big sister again. And Gabriel's gonna be a big brother. Gabriel looked confused but excited. Baby. Another baby, Sarah confirmed, laughing through her tears. Due next spring. They stayed at the grave for another hour, Sarah and Emma telling Daniel stories about their lives, Gabriel collecting special rocks to leave as offerings, Alexander standing quiet guard over his family, the family he'd been given by a man he'd never met but would be grateful to forever. As they left, Emma turned back one more time. I love you, First Daddy. I'll come back and visit soon. We all will, Sarah promised. On the drive home, Gabriel fell asleep in his car seat, and Emma was absorbed in a book. Sarah reached over and took Alexander's hand. Do you ever wonder what life would be like if that morning had never happened? She asked quietly. If Emma hadn't mistaken you for Daniel? Alexander thought about it. Sometimes. I'd probably still be in that penthouse, working 80-hour weeks, thinking I had everything, because I had money. I'd be rich and successful and completely empty. He glanced at her. What about you? I'd probably be drowning, Sarah admitted. Working myself to death, doing it all alone, not letting anyone help. Emma would be okay, kids are resilient. But I'd be less happy, less whole, less alive. One moment, Alexander marveled. One case of mistaken identity, and everything changed. It wasn't just chance, though, Sarah said. You could have walked away. You could have handed Emma back to me and gone on with your day. But you didn't. You chose to stay. You chose to see us. Best choice I ever made. They drove in comfortable silence for a while before Emma piped up from the back seat, not looking up from her book. You know what I think. What's that, sweetheart? Sarah asked. I think first Daddy sent you to us, Daddy Alexander. Like he was watching from heaven, and he saw us needing someone, and he picked you special. Because you needed us too. Alexander had to pull over, his vision blurring with tears. He turned to look at his daughter, because she was his daughter in every way that mattered, and saw wisdom in her 7-year-old eyes. You might be right, he managed to say. I am right, Emma said with certainty. Because that's what love does. It finds a way. First, Daddy loved us so much that even from heaven, he made sure we'd be okay. And now we have you and Gabriel and the new baby, and we're better than okay. We're perfect. We're not perfect, Sarah laughed. We're messy and complicated and perfectly imperfect, Alexander finished. Which is the best kind of perfect. That night, after the kids were in bed, Alexander and Sarah sat in their backyard, the yard where Emma's swing set stood next to Gabriel's sandbox, where they'd planted a tree in Daniel's memory that was now taller than Emma. The same yard where they'd gotten married, surrounded by close friends and family, with Emma as the flower girl and Gabriel as the very distracted ring bearer. I've been thinking, Sarah said, curled into Alexander's side on their patio couch, about the new baby's name. Yeah, if it's a girl, I'd like to name her Grace. Grace Danielle Sterling Martinez. Alexander felt his throat tighten. After Daniel. After Daniel, Sarah confirmed. Because his death was the worst thing that ever happened to me, but it also led to you.
To us.
To this life. That's Grace, isn't it? Beauty from ashes. Hope from despair. And if it's a boy? Sarah smiled. I was thinking.
James.
James Daniel Sterling Martinez. James means supplanter. One who comes after. Following in the footsteps, but making his own path. It's perfect, Alexander said. Either way, it's perfect. They sat together in the quiet evening, listening to the sounds of their neighborhood. Kids playing down the street, a dog barking, distant traffic. Normal sounds. Beautiful sounds. Alexander, Sarah said softly. Thank you for not forgetting your lunch that morning. Alexander laughed, remembering. I didn't forget my lunch. I never brought lunch. I know, Sarah said, grinning. But Emma didn't know that. She just knew she had a lunch to give and you needed it. Funny how things work out. Funny, Alexander agreed. But it wasn't funny at all. It was miraculous. He thought about all the small choices that had led to this moment. Emma being at the building that morning. Her childish belief that every man in a suit might be her daddy. His decision to accept a crumpled lunch bag instead of walking away. Sarah's courage in accepting his help. His willingness to be vulnerable. Their mutual decision to try, despite fear and pain and uncertainty. Any one of those moments could have gone differently. The chain could have broken. But it hadn't. Do you believe in fate? Alexander asked. Sarah considered this. I believe in choice. I believe we choose who we love and how we love them. But I also believe. She paused, searching for words. I believe in grace. In the universe or God or whatever you want to call it, sometimes putting people in our path, right when we need them. You were put in our path, Alexander. And we chose to let you stay. Best choice you ever made? Alexander asked with a smile. Second best, Sarah corrected. The first best was marrying Daniel. Because that led to Emma. And Emma led to you. And you led to Gabriel and this new baby and the life we're building. It's all connected. All grace. Later, much later, after Sarah had fallen asleep, Alexander walked through their quiet house. He stopped in Gabriel's room, watching his son sleep, thumb in his mouth, his favorite stuffed dinosaur clutched tight. Then Emma's room, where she'd fallen asleep with a book on her chest, her glasses askew. He carefully removed the glasses, marked her place in the book, and kissed her forehead. Love you, Daddy, she murmured, not quite awake. Love you too, sweetheart, Alexander whispered back. In his and Sarah's bedroom, he found the photo album Sarah had made years ago. He flipped through the pages, seeing the journey mapped out in pictures. Daniel and Sarah, young and in love. Emma as a baby in her father's arms. The grief after the loss. The healing that came slowly, painfully. Then Alexander's arrival. First the awkward early photos, then more natural ones. The blending of families. The growth of love. The last pages were still blank, waiting for new memories. The new baby. More milestones. More life. Alexander added a photo he'd taken that day, all 4 of them at Daniel's grave, Emma and Gabriel placing flowers, Sarah's hand on the headstone. Everyone connected. He wrote beneath it, "Family, made by love, grown by grace." As he climbed into bed beside Sarah, careful not to wake her, Alexander thought about the strange, miraculous path that had led him here. A billionaire CEO who'd thought he had everything, humbled by a 3-year-old with a paper bag lunch. A man who'd built walls around his heart, torn down by a woman brave enough to love again. A life he'd thought was complete, revealed to be hollow until it was filled with the chaos and beauty of family. Emma was right, it was all grace. First, Daddy's love, reaching from heaven to ensure his family would be cared for. Alexander's willingness to answer that call. Sarah's courage to try again. Emma's innocent faith that love could multiply instead of divide. Gabriel's existence, proof that new life could grow from loss. And the baby on the way, another promise of the future. The grave in that cemetery held a man Alexander had never met but loved nonetheless. Loved for the family he'd created, the legacy he'd left, the woman he'd loved so well that she knew how to love again. And somewhere Alexander liked to think, Daniel was watching, seeing his daughter thrive, his wife happy, his family expanded but not forgotten, seeing the man he'd somehow chosen to take care of them, doing his best to be worthy of that trust. "Thank you," Alexander whispered into the darkness, not sure if he was talking to Daniel or God or the universe or all 3. "Thank you for the lunch. Thank you for the second chance. Thank you for teaching me what actually matters." Sarah stirred beside him, her hand finding his even in sleep. And Alexander Sterling, billionaire, CEO, father, husband, fell asleep counting blessings instead of dollars, measuring wealth in love instead of stock prices, finally understanding that the best things in life can't be bought or earned or achieved. Sometimes they just show up at your feet in the form of a little girl with wild curls and a crumpled paper bag, whispering, "You forgot your lunch, Daddy," and changing everything forever.
The end.
Love doesn't end when someone dies. It transforms. It finds new vessels. It grows in unexpected gardens. And if we're very lucky, it finds us when we need it most, even when we don't know we're looking.